386 million cubic meters of sand, dredged from the seafloor, pumped through pipes, dropped in the Persian Gulf, not to fill something, not to fix something, to build land where there was none. From above, the shape that appeared looked like a palm tree, 16 fronds, a trunk, a crescent wrapped around it like a wall, 60 kilometers of new coastline, built on nothing but water and a decision. Here's what it took to get there. Dubai in the 1990s had a problem, not a slow one, a fast one. The coastline was disappearing, not because the sea was rising, because the city was consuming it. Hotels, roads, ports. Every year, more of the natural shoreline was taken up. Developers ran out of beachfront. Beachfront that doesn't exist can't be sold. And the Persian Gulf wasn't making it easy. The water there is shallow, sometimes less than 10 meters deep. The seabed is soft. The currents move constantly. Drop something in the water here, and the Gulf will move it. That's the enemy. Not the depth, the movement. The Gulf doesn't hold still. Sand dropped in the wrong place doesn't stay there. It drifts, it spreads, it disappears. Every engineer who looked at the idea of building an island here had to answer the same question. How do you pour sand into a sea that refuses to keep it? The decision came from Nakheel, a state-owned developer. The plan? Build an artificial island in the shape of a palm tree, roughly 5 kilometers wide, 5 kilometers long. Add a 2-kilometer trunk, 16 fronds, and a surrounding crescent breakwater 11 kilometers long. No island like this had ever been built before. No blueprint existed, no manual. Engineers and contractors had to invent the method as they went. Work started in 2001. Before any sand could stay put, the Gulf had to be stopped. That's not a metaphor. The currents in the Persian Gulf move sand constantly, enough to shift entire shallow seabeds over a matter of months. If sand was poured without protection, it would migrate. The palm shape would blur. The fronds would dissolve back into the Gulf floor. So the first task wasn't building the island, it was building a wall. The crescent breakwater, 11 kilometers long, designed to wrap around the entire palm and block wave energy and tidal drift before it could reach the island. The method? Rock. 7 million tons of it. Not local rock quarried from mountains in the UAE interior and the Hajar Range in the east. Blasted loose, loaded onto barges, hauled out to sea, dropped by crane. One rock at a time. Some of those rocks weighed up to 30 tons, placed with GPS guidance to land within centimeters of target coordinates, underwater, in a sea with low visibility and currents that pushed every barge off course the moment engines cut. 2 years. That's how long the breakwater took, and until it was complete, no sand could be placed in the protected zone. The island couldn't start. The project sat waiting while the wall was built. Here's what that wall changed. Once it closed, the Gulf inside became quieter, calmer. The sand placed behind it had a chance to stay. But the breakwater created a new problem. By blocking currents, it also blocked the water circulation that kept the Gulf inside the crescent moving. The water began to stagnate. That would matter later. Once the breakwater was in place, the real volume work began. 94 million cubic meters of sand. To give that a shape, enough to fill 37,000 Olympic swimming pools. Dredged from the seafloor of the Persian Gulf, several kilometers offshore. The machines that did it were trailing suction hopper dredgers, vessels that drag a pipe along the seafloor, suck up sand and water together, and store the mixture in a hull. Then they sail to the construction site and either dump the load or pump it through floating pipes directly onto the island. There were dozens of these vessels operating simultaneously. At peak, the project used some of the largest dredgers in the world. Each one worked around the clock in rotating shifts. The sand wasn't placed randomly. Engineers used GPS coordinates on every pour. The palm design, fronds, trunk, crescent, had to be accurate to within a meter. Getting a frond 30 meters too wide could change water flow patterns and destabilize adjacent fronds. The problem, hydraulically placed sand is loose. It compacts over time, but unevenly. If different sections compact at different rates, the island surface cracks. Buildings built on top tilt. Roads split. To deal with this, engineers used a method called vibrocompaction. Massive vibrating probes driven 20 to 30 meters into the sand, shaking the particles into tighter formation. Thousands of probe insertions across the entire surface. It took months, but even then, the sand moved. Not a lot, but enough. Some frond tips settled several centimeters more than predicted. Some areas near the trunk sank unevenly as the weight of construction above added pressure. At one point, engineers discovered that a section of the eastern fronds had shifted slightly in relation to the trunk, fractions of a degree, but at that scale, enough to require recalculation of every road alignment on top of it. Crews poured, vibrated, measured, adjusted, poured again. The sand that forms PalmJumeirah today is not where it was first placed. Every section moved at least once. Construction of the island's surface was still ongoing when the first buildings went up. That's not unusual for large projects. You build in phases, but on PalmJumeirah, the ground beneath the buildings was still compacting, still settling, still, in some areas, responding to the weight being added above it. The frond villas, rows of residential homes along each of the 16 fronds, were some of the first structures built. Ground floors, foundations, concrete poured on sand that had only been in place for 2 to 3 years. Some homes began showing signs within years. Hairline cracks in walls, slight misalignment in doors and window frames. Not collapse, but movement. Foundations shifting as the sand below adjusted. The trunk section, which carries the monorail and the main road network, required deep pilings. Some piles driven 30 to 40 meters into the seafloor, bypassing the loose sand entirely, anchoring into harder substrate below. That solved the settlement problem for heavy infrastructure. For the villas, the solutions were more localized: injected grout, added fill, individual repairs. Then there was the heat. Construction in Dubai runs through summer temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius. Concrete poured in extreme heat cures too fast. The surface hardens before the interior does, trapping moisture, creating internal stress. Cracks form. The structure weakens before it's even loaded. Contractors adjusted mix ratios, poured at night, covered pours with wet burlap and plastic sheeting during the day. Some sections had to be demolished and poured again. And through all of this, the settling, the heat, the repairs, workers were arriving in shifts, living in labor camps on the mainland, bused to the construction site on the growing island. At peak, around 40,000 workers were involved in the broader PalmJumeirah project. Most were migrant laborers. Many had never seen a project at this scale. Some rotated every few months. An island with no road connection is a property nobody can reach. Early on, a bridge was planned and built, the Palm Gateway Bridge, connecting the trunk to the mainland. But a bridge alone couldn't move enough people. The Palm Monorail was added, a 5.4-kilometer elevated rail system running down the center of the trunk from the mainland gateway to the Atlantis Hotel at the Crescent. It became the first monorail in the Middle East. The challenge: building elevated rail infrastructure on ground that was still compacting under it. The monorail columns had to be anchored deep enough to remain stable as the surface around them continued to settle. But the surface settlement was uneven. Different sections of the trunk settling at different rates. If columns settled differently from each other, the rail track would warp. A misaligned monorail track at speed is a serious failure risk. Engineers drove each column foundation to bedrock where possible. Where that wasn't viable, they used deep friction piles, long steel and concrete shafts designed to transfer load through friction along their length rather than bearing on a single point. Slower, more expensive, but stable. The monorail opened in 2009, 5 years after the first residents moved in. Meanwhile, utilities had to be built under an island that hadn't finished settling. Water mains, sewage lines, electrical conduits, telecom cables, all of it buried in sand that moved. Joints and pipes that were tight on installation day could gap within a year as sections of the island shifted relative to each other. Some pipes cracked, some had to be excavated and resealed. On a conventional construction site, that's a repair call. On a man-made island in the Persian Gulf, it meant cutting through finished roads, opening trenches and compacted sand, working around a water table that was essentially the sea. The final price tag for PalmJumeirah is reported at around $12 billion. Some estimates go higher. That number doesn't fully capture what it took to move 94 million cubic meters of material through open water, compact it, build on it, repair it, and connect it to a city. The seabed where the sand was dredged is permanently altered. The areas offshore where suction dredgers worked are now several meters deeper than before. The marine ecosystems that existed in the shallow zones, seagrass beds, coral communities, fish habitat, were removed. Not damaged. Removed. The material that formed them was pumped into a different location. Inside the crescent, the stagnation problem that engineers identified early became real. Without the natural current flow, water inside the protected zone warmed faster, oxygenated less, accumulated more sediment. In the years after construction, reports documented declining water quality inside the crescent. Some coral transplant efforts were made. Hard to say how much recovered. The workers who built the island, the 40,000 at peak, left no monument with their names on it. Most returned to home countries after their contracts ended. Some stayed in Dubai. The labor conditions on the project, like many Gulf megaprojects of that era, drew scrutiny from international labor organizations. PalmJumeirah is still there. It appears on satellite images as a perfect palm tree. The 16 fronds are intact. The crescent holds. The trunk carries traffic. Around 80,000 people live on it. There are hotels, apartment towers, villas, restaurants, a water park at the tip of the crescent. The Atlantis Hotel alone occupies a section of that crescent, a building on land that didn't exist in the year 2000. The monorail runs. The bridge carries cars. The pipes, repaired where they needed to be, move water in and waste out. The seabed where the sand came from is still deeper. That doesn't reverse. The marine habitat that was there is not there. Replaced by residential villas with ocean views. The breakwater rocks hauled from mountains in the Hajar Range are underwater and permanent. The mountains they came from have the quarry scars to show it. The sand that forms the island is still compacting. Slowly, the rate is decreasing every year, but it hasn't stopped. The palm exists. The seafloor where the sand came from is deeper now. The water inside the crescent is enclosed. The rock is no longer mountain. 94 million cubic meters, placed, compressed, built on, lived on. None of it goes back.